Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander. Today on the show, I'm very excited to welcome Adam Robinson. So if you don't know Adam, you should check out his content on LinkedIn. He is becoming prolific there. But he's the founder and CEO of retention.com and RB2B, where he bootstrapped retention.com to 22 million ARR in 4 years by helping e-commerce stores identify their anonymous site visitors and sending them triggered emails. He launched RB2B in March 2024 to help SaaS companies identify anonymous site visitors and see their LinkedIn profiles in Slack for free. He lives in Austin with his wife, Helen, and daughter, Emma. Beyond SaaS, you can definitely get a lot of benefit from any situation for people visiting your site and seeing them in Slack, looking at you agencies. So they definitely recommend checking it out. Without further ado, let's get into the interview. Adam, great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks, Dan. I'm pumped to be here.
Yeah, we were basically talking about the agency world and Outbound and how a lot of agencies aren't doing this well enough. Maybe before we go there, let me second guess what I just said. Can you give people a quick background on what you're up to?
Yeah. So my company, I have two startups. One is called retention.com, and we sell to e-commerce stores primarily, and it is person-level website visitor identity. So somebody hits the site, they don't fill out a form. In the US, we can resolve that to a deliverable email address and then use it to power a bunch of e-commerce workflows like site abandonment, product abandonment, cart abandonment, checkout abandonment. Anything that has abandonment, there's this fundamental problem with e-commerce stores where people have to be logged in order for Shopify to identify them. So we cover this whole world of people that's not logged in. And then we created a product that we launched in March called RB2B, which is instead of resolving to a personal email, it resolves to a LinkedIn profile. It is aimed at B2B software as the TAM. And, it's a freemium app where we push a LinkedIn URL and a headshot into Slack for free. And then, if you want all these features and integrations and buy a bunch of credits or whatever, then you got to pay. So those are my two businesses. And I do work in public, which is if you're listening to this and you know me, you probably have seen my LinkedIn content. So over 4.5 years, I bootstrapped 25 million ARR. I only have a team of 40. So it's super profitable. I love telling this story because I feel like the other story is told 99.9% of the time. And you hear about successful venture-backed companies. You don't hear about most venture-backed companies, which are not successful. And then very rarely is a beyond lifestyle business bootstrapper sort of showing you what's possible if you just stick with it, right? So that's kind of my side hustle. It's content about building this thing, which does help my business, but I also want to use the megaphone to let people know that we're all striving for product market fit. If you don't have it, the VC money's not going to work at all. If you do have it, you kind of don't need the VC money. You just need time. That's the medium answer.
No, that's awesome. And there's so many places to go there. First, I just want to build up RB2B. We have no arrangement. I don't get any money from you. But if you're listening to this as an agency, it's really cool. I think that from just going through so many SaaS products for so many years, many of us have just become numb to them and to the childlike wonder of software and technology and what it can do. So I'll just give you a plug because there's that sort of emotional effect. And basically what it's doing is it's plugging names and faces of people that are actually on your site directly to Slack, right? Versus every other software requires this ramp up and this learning period and all this stuff that has to happen before you can enjoy anything from it. So kudos there.
Hey, there's a great story about kind of how, we were sending people during our sort of pre-beta a script and it would just email them a spreadsheet every day. And I was trying to do the thing that I say you should do. I was will you buy this before the product exists? And people were no. And then the second we sent that LinkedIn URL and headshot to Slack, and I was walking around parties and just showing people on my cell phone. I was that person is on retention.com's website right now. The facial expressions were just what? And we weren't even planning on doing a freemium thing. But I thought that moment was so magical that it could have some real virality if it was a freemium go-to-market strategy. In addition to my content, which was having a lot of success with virality in this very tight set, I thought the two viral things could play off of each other.
And it's so simple, but there's something about seeing a face that changes everything.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
It's so different. I mean, that's kind of what that story is about. It's the same data over a different medium wasn't doing anything for anybody. And then the second you sort of change it up and you humanize it or whatever, it's all of a sudden how do I get that? Is that for sale?
Yeah. And so kind of tied to that, talking about your content. So your content's great. You're talking about building in public, like living and breathing that. One thing I love about it is it seems like you're one of the most anti-mimetic, to use a big word, marketers that I've run into in a while, where you're sort of like living by the principles that are timeless, but zigging where other people zag. One thing that I really like is, and I mean this like respectfully, but like the interface is not like this Web 2.0 Silicon Valley fancy thing. It's like very bare bones. The logo that I think you just rolled out with looks like it's from 1995. And like,
Yeah.
I'm a fan of that, but I'm kind of like weird and I like that stuff. Like, how has that played out for you going in that direction?
There's just like a lot behind this question. And I tried to talk about some of it in that post. So like, I truly believe that in marketing, I actually said this example in the post. I was reading the Seth Godin book and he was working with Silk, the milk alternative. And he's like, they weren't selling any when they were on the shelf, even though it's shelf stable because it's like milk alternative, milk alternative, milk alternative. He's like, we got grocery stores to put it in the refrigerator section next to milk. And all of a sudden it started selling off the shelves. It's like milk, not milk. Right? I think our brains are just like programmed to stop at pattern interrupt. And if I were like trying to raise a big venture round, I might try to present myself as I'm another big venture company and I look like one and I feel like one and I talk like one and like whatever else. But like, since I'm not trying, since there's no, I think that's the only reason you would want to look like everybody else, but it's a very compelling reason because it's like how people keep themselves going most of the time, right? But if you don't have that, I think as much of the opposite of everyone as you can possibly be, even if it's hideous, it's almost better. Because like, who does that, right? If you can be the opposite of everyone, that's great. And the ultimate dream in marketing is to like, with your product, it's the same thing. It's like, you know, I was talking to an entrepreneur who's trying to like start this e-commerce dashboard. And there's a couple e-commerce dashboard companies, Triple Whale and Northbeam in the Shopify ecosystem. And he's like, well, we're delivering our data in a Google sheet and it's dope, but like we're about to make a dashboard. I'm like, dude, like I would consider not even making a dashboard. Like you're the Google sheet guy. I'm like, there's this company called Clay in B2B that is an Airtable. You know what I mean? Like it is literally like, I don't know if they use Airtable's code, but like that is what it is with some connections, right? So it's like, they didn't need a UI really, you know.
Yeah, it seems like they just paid Airtable for like a fancier plan, basically.
Yeah, like being very different in ways that matter. It like allows you to like build less and capture more market share from this like niche that wants that. People will be willing to forego features if what you have is different and better. Like kind of an apples to oranges thing, right? So
right, exactly. And it's sort of like there's been so much emphasis put on design and kind of like rounding out all the edges, but what we've sort of gotten is like this one monolithic type of interface with SaaS, right? Where it all looks like whatever it is, that Dutch design and so on. So there's definitely something to be said for that. It also reminds me of, you probably know Rory Sutherland and his work and like everything he talks about. He talks about Red Bull and how it makes no sense on paper. And if you were like, I want to sell this soda, it has caffeine in it, it tastes like shit, and it's a smaller container and it's more expensive. But it turns out that we ascribe medicine to tasting bad, and if there's no pain, then we don't think it works, right? So there's probably a SaaS equivalent of that where it's like, oh, I'm getting the goods because this looks like shit. It looks like a spreadsheet and it's something that like some hacker in Estonia has built, and probably means I have something other people don't, right?
Yep, totally. That could definitely be part of it. But yeah, I love just like, I did this with retention.com 2 years ago. Like we created this brand and it just looked really weird at the time. And then a competitor showed up over that 2-year period. They had just started maybe 6 months before us. And like 3 months ago, they literally copied it was like the weirdest, this browns and greens and like red oranges, right? They literally copied the scheme. So like, I can't wait, like, you know, this RB2B Atari brand, whatever it is that we're going to launch in January, like a year and a half from then, like a bunch of startups like have this kind of crazy pixelated brand or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of like putting a spoiler on a Chrysler or something. It's like it's still a Chrysler and all. So that all makes sense. I guess, can you talk a little bit about what, you know, our B2B is responding to? I'm going to focus a little more on that. We can also talk about retention, but our audience are agencies and
yeah.
But, you know, you talk a lot about like inbound led, outbound. I'd love to hear kind of like what you think has changed in the landscape. And
yeah. And by the way, like, I think I'm going to like step off that term because ultimately it's like outbound is getting harder. I think almost like show me the person that doesn't think so, right? And like I think that the world that we will likely be in, there was a time from 2012 when Predictable Revenue, the book was written until maybe 2022, where you could sit a college grad in a chair in front of a desk with a computer and they could press buttons and like business would come back, like salespeople, right? Like, and that was a type of sales that did really well for software in that very simple playbook. Surprisingly, like it just worked really well, you know, and now it doesn't anymore. I mean, response rates, he says in his book, like you could expect a 5 to 10% positive reply rate, right? It's just crazy, right? And now it's around 0 for most people.
Yeah.
But literally it's hovering around 0. And the response is like, oh, but create 1,000 domains and send 1 million emails. And then like, if it's 0.1%, then like, we'll get a couple deals. But that's obviously not something that can persist forever. It's just,
especially as markets get more and more niched, right? And your market is nowhere near big enough to sustain that.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think there's a type of sales that, by the way, we have to do at retention.com. It's expensive, it's complicated, but like, it's kind of like we have to like account-based marketing people to a physical place. Like we have an account list. We have to go find them in the real world, get them to an event that is compelling enough for them to attend it. And then that starts a sales cycle, right? Like that's the whole motion. And it involves a lot of skill, a lot of in real life network. That type of sales is always going to exist. It always will. Like you will always have face-to-face selling if you have a deal big enough to do it. But like, and then I think like free stuff will distribute indefinitely in a faster way than it used to because connection continues to increase. So like something very valuable and very free is kind of it. And then this middle, it's like the toothpaste tube got squeezed. Like the middle kind of doesn't work anymore, right? So
we've seen similar dynamics, and I've always thought that like, and it makes sense. SaaS are always the cool kids, and there's like way more money going through there, and you guys kind of built that predictable revenue model, but that model was always kind of broken for consultative or for anything that is bigger than just come here, check out my demo, because the amount of trust that's required is just so much higher. Like you're not going to get the benefit, maybe at all, but at least not until weeks or months after the service is delivered, right? So what we're seeing is like, if you're going to get some wet behind the ears college kid to be like the face of these campaigns, like good luck getting, the CMO of Unilever on the phone or whatever.
Totally. So like, what's the play, right? It's like, if you call that predictable revenue book marketing, which I think it was, right? It was just a way, it was marketing that worked. And they built out sales teams around that. It's like now that doesn't exist. So like the stuff higher in the funnel has become much more important because like how if people are not finding out about you through this email mechanism that works so well, like how are they finding out about you? And to me, it's just hard to think about all of the spaces in the world, but like people are on social media platforms and there are people in their universes that are capturing these algorithms are incredible. Somebody is talking to them about what you want to talk to them somehow, right? Like somebody's found this angle, right? So in 2024, more than ever, and in 2025, as sure as I am that email response rates to cold email will continue to go down, and I am positive of that, I am certain that organic social media content, sort of like audience aggregation skill by people who own companies and want to market to people, will go up. It's just so valuable that more and more people are going to learn how to do it.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree. Like, I think that Outbound was always kind of like this redheaded stepchild where it was like, oh, you just plug in some tokens and then out comes the business. And it's like, it's becoming more like every other channel, which is a mature channel. It's going to take investment. Is it as much as an investment as ads? Like still probably not that depending on your niche, but it's getting up there. And it's also becoming kind of part of this gray area between inbound and outbound, where it's like the idea of doing mass cold outreach for most verticals, unless you truly have a massive market and you want to just buy domains all day and like learn how to play that game. But for anybody listening to this, agencies like not going to work too much.
Yeah, I think like maybe like massive market, very early stage startups. It's like you're canvassing. Or it's kind of like a display ad campaign or something that's just cheaper than that, right? But like outbound hasn't gone away, but it's warm outbound. Like you have to like build trust with these people somehow and entice them to take some sort of action. And then once they've shown intent, then you got your list of people to sort of go after or whatever.
Right. Intent, or for us, a lot of what we're doing is looking at commonalities, like so-and-so went from one company to another. And that's, that sort of thing is, but the funny thing is so few people are willing to do that because it doesn't seem like it can scale. But the reality is you keep coming up with these ideas and you can kind of run the same playbook forever, at least from what we've seen. So that all makes sense. I guess to do a little sidebar, how do you feel about LinkedIn and where it's going?
So this is an interesting sidebar. I got 40 employees. I actually consider myself in the edutainment business, but I don't consider anybody else in my company in the edutainment business, but I very much consider myself in the edutainment business. And I feel like LinkedIn is like more every day becoming an edutainment platform. You know, people are there to learn and to get entertained. It's like, I want to get better at my job and I want to get entertained at the same time. And I think that's different than it was 5 years ago. And it will probably be far more of that in 5 years than it even is now. Does it make sense for so like I've had a prolific rise in my LinkedIn presence because I got really good at finding my angle with this buyer persona of like SaaS revenue leader. My content's just like really differentiated and really good for them for a lot of interesting ways. Like in the reality of it is no other SaaS CEO who's at 25 million ARR can or is willing to share what I am willing to share. That's like the kind of, if you were to summarize why my stuff breaks through, it's mostly that. It's like, I don't have investors. I know that sharing the real story is what people want and no one else can do it. So I just do it, right? When stuff sucks, it sucks. When it's great, it's great. I've never even heard of another SaaS CEO say the word churn on LinkedIn because it is literally kryptonite to like the future value of your company. If you have bad churn, then you either lie about it or you act like you've got it under control and it's getting better through the stuff you're doing and here's the trend and like whatever else, right? I'm like, my churn sucks. I don't know why, like what, whatever. And like the reality is 80% of SaaS CEOs are in my boat, but like everyone's acting like they're not, right? So like that's just an example of like why it cuts through. And it happens to be that they're also my buyers right now. So it's just this amazing alignment. Dave Gerhardt, who's a marketer, when I was trying to write for e-commerce stores, it didn't resonate the same way. He's like, I just don't think you gave yourself enough. You would have found he's like, you hadn't found your angle yet. And it's like the angle is just so much easier to find with SaaS founders because it's so obvious to me. It's like, oh, I'm willing to say what other people are not, and I can just talk about my own business and like it does great.
Yeah. I have a question there. What's the scariest post you ever posted? The one where you're like, you hovered over the publish button for the longest amount of time?
So I don't know that it was scary. It was just like really hard. There was one in April last year when I do monthly updates and I share our ARR monthly graph. And we were down 3 months in a row before April. April, we were down the fourth month, we were down 2.3%, and it was more than the prior 3 months. And like, I didn't know when it was going to turn around. And I wrote that, right? And my executive team's like, why are you saying this shit? Like, who is this helping? I'm like, I kind of want our employees to know how I feel in the boat we're in together or whatever. And it was so hard for even me to do that. I just know no one else can write that, because like of all that, they got investors and they got whatever. No one else is making a content brand out of sharing that type of content. So like I was going on a podcast tour at the time, and like a few times that week, people were like, man, I read that post. I was like, this dude's a G, like, holy cow. How did he even write that? Right. Like when I have a post like that and I see people in person or on podcasts or whatever for the next couple of weeks, they literally ask, they're like, how do you write what you write? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, literally, how can you bring yourself to put that on paper and then hit publish? It's because I know how therapeutic it is for my audience, right? Like just to know that someone else is in the same boat that you are, because you don't get that anywhere, right? And that is what gives me the sort of power to do it. I think it's like, as much as I hate it and as much as it's like kind of humiliating, plus like, I don't know, like not very many people have bootstrapped 25 million ARR. So like of the content creators, no matter how you slice it, I'm pretty successful. I love my life. I would have never, this literally was my moonshot goal of 6 years ago to like get to where I am right now. So I think that also makes it easier. It's like, even if my business is shrinking, I'm still crushing it. You know what I mean? Like it's just sort of, so yeah, that was the hardest one.
Yeah.
There was another one earlier this year where we were actually growing, but we cut retention.com staff by 40% because I had put a team in place for like a 9-figure ARR business, and it was just kind of stuck in the mud with churn, but it was still super profitable. And I was just like, everybody decided, our exec team decided like we could totally do the same thing with half the team. No question. So we did.
That all makes sense, because that was going to be the question I'd bring up, is like, there might be something about SaaS that makes that easier, but maybe that's everybody can go towards that direction, even if they're not going full on. Because what you tend to see, this isn't against anybody that shares like family, personal stuff, but there tends to be this explosion on LinkedIn of all this personal stuff, of oversharing in that regard, but not sharing the stuff that will actually make people feel less alone.
I'm 0% personal. It's like all this sort of like, I'm making a drama out of the day-to-day building of my company, right? Like that's literally how I approach it. I'm like, I am a character. Santosh is a character. This dude Taylor's a character who comes in and out. Pete's a character. So yeah. And it's like, yeah, I think it's super powerful. I'm trying to get a lot better at actual storytelling, because I think my writing style is like, it's good, but it's a bit lazy. I just like do this list thing, and then I do a takeaway that like whatever pain I'm agitating with the list, it like lets people out of it, gets some relief or resolution of some sort, and then like a really coy close. But like people remember stories, and stories are hard to write. Good stories are hard to write. I'm like trying to read books on how to like properly structure narrative and stuff, because if I can get a couple of those going out every week, like people remember those. I've done 3 or 4 this year, and like people are just like, man, like that one where you deleted the whole code base like 2 weeks before you sold the company or whatever, like it just sticks with you so much.
This is super interesting, because like there was a Reddit post associated with Slate Star Codex or Astro Codex 10, basically like Scott Alexander, if you know his stuff. Somebody in that subreddit posted this, and it was like, you can tell a niche where people are playing to win because there's funny stories that come out of it. And I thought that was super interesting, because it's like, if you look at other niches where people are successful, like consultants and other stuff, versus like people trying to do the big thing, you tend to just get weirder stories, because it's like you're doing things that are atypical or not expected of you. So I think you see that more in SaaS. I think you see it in agencies too, especially the ones that are kind of like SaaS companies and innovating and doing different things versus just working with the same 3 clients for 20 years or whatever.
Yeah. So can I ask you, what do you think about Outbound?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm bullish on it, because I still think there's this element of information overwhelm where there's a lot of people that don't want to wade through it. It's getting harder to wade through it. And if somebody reaches out and they send the right signals that they can be trusted, they're going to help that person in 30 minutes more than they could ever benefit from like 6 months of research or whatever it is. But I think it is changing. I think that cold is slowly dying or quickly dying, and there needs to be a basis of trust first. So that's my spiel on Outbound for now. Yeah.
Yeah. And how are you helping agencies do that? Are you helping them with the trust piece also?
The way we're doing it is definitely evolving, but over the last, really since 2020 and before that, the main way we're doing it is looking at commonalities. So looking for some basis that will allow people to find and open doors with prospects based on trust they might already have. So sometimes that's as simple as just geographies, just being like, I'm in the same place as you, I will be in the same place as you for a conference. Other times it's more sophisticated, looking at friends of friends, looking at, past companies and that kind of thing. Yep. And increasingly, like as we're, because we pivoted from a done for you model, and then we got sick of that. We've realized like it's not helping people, because either it doesn't work or it works and then they've inherited this black box. So we've moved to training and implementation. So that's opened up more flexibility. So we're looking to more tools like yours, and just kind of looking at like the gray area middle zone between inbound and outbound to help people.
Yeah.
So
cool.
And we don't have a lot of time left. I guess like to kind of close things out, can you talk a little bit about what you're working on like over the next few months and what you're excited about?
Yeah. So for agencies, most of them probably have kind of like a low amount of website traffic. So like this isn't really a problem for them, but we resolve. So taking a step back, a mistake that I made when I launched this product is I was selling people leads that turned into demos. A website visitor is not a lead. It is a signal that when combined with other signals can sort of like it can help you move people down the funnel. It is not someone raising their hand, submitting a demo form. And it's not even close to an actual lead, right? So, but on the other hand, like if you're kind of small enough, it's a fantastic product just with like the free Slack thing, because you look at your 5 leads a day. It's very obvious if, I say lead again, it's very obvious if this person's interesting or not. And, you sort of reach out or whatever. When you get to like the 25 to 50 per day, most people's traffic who are getting that amount of traffic, the actual ICP website visitors, for whatever reason, it's very low. The percentage is low. So there's this needle in a haystack problem. And it's kind of like, it's annoying for people to look through them. And you would think that it would be worth it for salespeople to spend time looking through this, but like they got a lot of other high priority shit going on that's like hotter than this. So there's like a filtering problem right now with growth stage SaaS, who I think is our ICP. And then there's also like a what now problem. So if I showed my head of sales at retention.com, who's got direct reports, he's trying to close 5 deals before the end of the month, he's got a lot going on. If I show it up with the 3 perfect leads, it'd actually be a liability, because he's like, I don't want to just put them in a sequence. I want to actually come up with a perfect thing to say to this person, right? So there's a what now problem, but it's not what now I'm not smart enough to figure it out. It's like, what now I don't want to take the time to try to craft the perfect message based upon the context of what happened to like make this signal come to light.
Yeah.
So what I'm working on is solving the filtering and routing problem, and then building. I think this is a perfect use case for LLMs. It's like, look at where this visitor is in the CRM deal stage and the pages that they looked at on the website, and just show me some copy that could work for them. And then I'll edit it and hit send. Right. So it's like the shifting the product from what I thought was a demand gen use case, which is basically like, give me a list of emails to spam. That's becoming less effective every minute, right? Shifting the product towards I'm going to, in a dead simple way, give salespeople signal and recommended action. I think it will improve the stickiness of the product a lot with that ICP, with like a growth stage SaaS company.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And like what I'm sort of seeing where things, as things are going, is it's almost like it's not full automation for everything. It's more like, I'm routing this to my station over here, just like you would at a restaurant where a chef has a mise en place, and I'm going to work on it with this tool during this time. So it's not just this constant task switching where it's like, yeah, the cost of over automating that is higher than the benefit. So
yeah, and a lot of the information, a lot of the valuable information of a website visitor, you actually very much want to see it if you're a rep and it's in your CRM. Like, you don't want it to just pass through and shoot this person out with you having no knowledge of it occurring, right? So, the temptation is like all this great UGC we get. It's like, oh yeah, we can send personalized AI generated videos to anonymous website visitors using Clay and SendSpark and Trigify and like all this shit, right? But like, that's like a signal first use case of this tool. And then there's like a fit first use case, which is like, make sure the TAM is in the CRM, route the signal through the CRM to get filtered and then tagged with a rep, then send it to Slack with an alert for the rep, and be able to tell them what they should probably say to this person based upon pages they looked at in like previous history. So I think the latter thing that I described is actually the much more valuable use of this. Right. And that's a hypothesis right now, but like, we'll see.
They'll hopefully be helpful. I mean, for our audience, like the volume's much lower. So I think that if it's piped into a situation where there's like, a starting point, just avoiding that blank page of here's the AI generated email, which you should not send. You should edit this. That's already, tremendously helpful, I think.
Totally. I think it'll be a breakthrough. It's slightly trickier to implement or whatever, but I think it'll be so much more useful that like it'll offset it.
One question there real quick, kind of tactical, is like, what do you recommend people say, right? I'm always on the fence about this. Do I just say, hey, I caught you on our website via our tricky tool here, or do you just play dumb?
I think it depends. If you're selling MarTech and they've heard of us and they follow me on LinkedIn, say I use RBDB. right? Like if you're not in that world of like selling to salespeople and marketers, I wouldn't reference it. I would just, however you would open up a not completely cold email to somebody, like however you would open that up, right? Like problem statement, solution statement, some social proof, whatever, like, but very brief. You know, these are like brand impressions. And the pushback we get, and we've gotten for 5 years, is like, won't this freak people out? My response is like, they're like, shouldn't I wait? Right? It's like, no, never wait in sales, right? I mean, don't send it 1 second later, but like, don't wait 24 hours. Like, send it that day. But it just, so many people visit so many websites. There's actually a fairly low likelihood that they will associate their website visit with getting that message. And most of the time when they do, it's like this, oh my God, I was just thinking about it. Sometimes like they don't even realize they visited the site. They don't remember it, but they know they've been thinking about it. And then they get this email or this LinkedIn message or whatever, and they're like, oh, well, that's interesting. So I would not advertise that you saw them on the site. I would just create the compelling email based upon who they are. And yeah, you know, try to get some touches in on whatever channels, like email, LinkedIn, like whatever.
Yeah.
Phone, if you use phones, like enrich the phone number and call them, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a million other questions that I could ask, but I think it'll take us too far off course. And this has been a lot of fun. So let's hopefully do a follow up at some point. And is there a place people should go? There's a lot of things you're up to, but
yeah, LinkedIn is where you'll find my stuff. That's where I'm doing like everything content wise. So Adam Robinson on LinkedIn, RB2B, and then rb2b.com. R, like retention.com is my other business. So it's a throwback to that business. So it's R and then B2B, like B2B. The number.
It's free and it will send you faces of people on your site. So
yeah, it's wild.
Very cool, Adam. Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Dan.